Hello and welcome to Story Talkies. And this time it is rather interesting because there are two storytellers talking to each other. It's a pleasure having Uday Kiran as our guest this time. Something interesting about Uday is that he started his career with torches, setting them across the remotest part of West Bengal, and now he's a torch bearer for upskilling among the youth and also people who are not generally getting the right guidance when they want to upskill. So that's the journey that he has made in past 23, 24 years. He has been into the CPG and then he moved to the people practices and now he is a coach. He has been training people, upskilling them, making them better communicators. And recently, he's also co-founded Mensa. It's an audio platform for live conversations. And now Mensa is coming up or already started courses, small courses for people to consume and engage with. So it's a very different concept that we are getting, and it will be interesting to know more about it. And in this conversation, we will figure out how the upskilling towards business storytelling is actually working. Is it something that we can actually learn, or is it something that we are born with? So, with that, Uday, welcome to Story Talkies. Pleasure having you here. And let's begin our conversation.
Thank you so much, Nidhi. Thank you so much for having me on this. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Begin from the beginning, from selling torches to being a torch bearer. How's the journey been?
In all the ways that I've actually thought myself in the narrative, this is the best one I'm getting from a torches to torch bearer. I'm surely now going to copy this and use it in a lot of different places. Yeah, I mean, it's very, when you look back, obviously it looks very nice because that's how Steve Jobs talks, that you can only connect the dots. So when I did begin my journey with Everready and when I was getting into sales, hardcore sales into rural parts, one of the only things that would really work in those markets is how you would really be up to those retailers and tell them stories about how you could not supply the batteries and torches for them because Everready was a product which was sold on demand. And if you just get into the shop without this quota of batteries and torches that the retailers or wholesalers needed for that day, then you really get a pasting from them, which is what exactly happened to me on the day one of my sales. Why are you here if you can't give it to me? Because, there's a product which was sold on demand. So right up front, you had to be knowing how to actually handle all of that. A lot of us generally tend to think that salespeople are very good storytellers. I think salespeople are very good storytellers, not because of anything. I think circumstances just force us to get into situations where you kind of try and do that on and on. And I think by default, it becomes a practice. I kind of recognize that that is something that that was the only way I was making sense to a lot of people. So when I moved into different organizations, handled brands, later on handled brands like Santur or Chandrika, started doing a lot of work in consumer research, worked with a lot of sales teams. Then, of course, moved to Samsung, where it was slightly more modern and fast, much more faster than consumer products, where we were handling mobiles, and Samsung was doing extremely well. Where we were doing a lot of technology and retail and the new ways of really doing retail. Even there, what is normally called as best practices was the best form of storytelling, right? So once I finished all of that, at some point of time, I realized that I had done enough of it. And what was interesting for me was to kind of see if I could work. Leadership fascinated me a lot. And when there was an opportunity to kind of start off something within Samsung in the form of sales and marketing academy, because we realized that we had a lot of resources, we had a lot of technology, we had a lot of ideas, but the problem was the behavior was not setting in. And that is when I was in charge of setting up this entire academy. And very quickly, I realized that a lot of theory was just going down the drain. And I remember this first workshop, which I did in 2018, when I had a bunch of sales leaders. And about halfway through, I realized that people, I thought I'll get complimented because I was doing a fantastic workshop. Halfway through, people said, look, it's not making any sense. And that's when I dug back, and started sharing experiences of how I learned. And in the next session, that kind of connected. And that's when I discovered storytelling. That's the only way you can make sense with the world. Uh, did a lot of work in terms of learned, understood what it is to build stories out of data, out of what is available. And that became a very natural way of communicating. And that kind of seems to have caught up a lot more, right? And yeah, that's where it is. So I think getting it all together, I think if communication, like the only purpose of communication is to have to get a response from the other person, right? The only reasonable reason why you want to kind of communicate to someone else is to get some action done. I've been discovering, like you have, Nidhi, is that stories aid in the powerful aspect of ensuring that your communication moves from just knowing to the doing cap, right? And I think stories make you understand a lot of things. So that's why I think we've come a fair amount of journey in this entire business storytelling, from just knowing what it is uh, to moving it as a practice and getting it done in a regular conversation, so that we are able to get things done. So that's where I am really. That's the status.
It's an interesting journey that you've had discovering storytelling as a tool for communication. Now, do you think it's a skill that actually can be acquired and honed? Because we have been hearing that the storytellers are born; they are born storytellers. But I don't think I was born a storyteller. But do you think it's possible for people to skill up? And what kind of skilling do you think they need?
I do an exercise right at the beginning of every storytelling workshop that I do. I ask people, tell me a story behind your name. And the moment I ask that question, it's almost unstoppable, because almost all the 20 odd people will go into that moment when they were named. And then I use them and say that, look, all of us are natural storytellers, because a lot of them would actually not lift up the hand when I ask them a question, are you a natural storyteller? Nobody actually believes that. But when you actually when you actually ask them a question that triggers a story, it's amazing how many people actually come up and actually tell you a story, right? Now, what has also happened is that we are natural storytellers as we grow up, but I think a lot of the way we study, the lot of education, a lot of our grooming eventually in the schools uh, makes us get away a lot from the natural way of stories, although that is how we process. And we tend to become very the givers of theory, slightly more pedantic. So yes, I think a lot of storytelling revolves around the fact that to rediscover the skills and let yourself learn structures that will help you to talk about stories and tell the stories. In fact, one of the things that I keep telling people is that when you tell a story, don't tell others about how to tell that story. Tell the story. Don't come in between the story and yourself. Don't come in between the story and the audience. Tell what happened. The story is always about a sequence of things that have happened at a point of time, with a set of people, and it ends with a element of surprise or unexpected nature. The more often than not, when you actually just do that, a story is coming through. So this is a skill. The second aspect about why I think you actually asked a very important question about why it is important to upskill is because business storytelling is slightly more evolved, right? Business storytelling is not so much about once upon a time in a tiger. You can't do that in a corporate meeting. You can't obviously get there. You can't get into what they call as a story voice. So business storytelling is about how can you embed those anecdotes, those examples, those real life experiences into your conversations, like what you are having with me, and make a point with it. So which means that one must be aware of what exactly to use at that point of time, which story to be used, because our lives are a series of stories and experiences. So which one would you want to use at that appropriate time? How do you kind of preface it with, this is the point that I want to make with that story, and then ensure that it happens, uh, without letting people really get into this mode that you are telling a story. One of the funniest discoveries that I've had in my experience of storytelling is that people do get pissed off when you say that you're telling them a story. But when you tell them a story without letting them know that it's a story, that's what they really love. So I think these are some of the skills that you need to kind of, we need to kind of upskill. Uh, because it does really does its magic, right? It does really have its impact. But I think a lot of unlearning is required in the way we communicate. In fact, to just summarize the whole aspect of what I'm just trying to say, communication, if you look at it as a whole bouquet of stuff, I think storytelling is one of the most powerful communication strategies that we can use, because each of us have our own communication styles. And if we are able to kind of put storytelling as one of our strongest communicating arsenal, one of our strengths, I'm sure it's going to be something that will magically transform the way you are able to connect with people and influence people.
That's a very cohesive answer or cohesive approach that you have in terms of storytelling. So you're saying it's a bedrock of good communication. So taking that conversation forward, you have a platform now for conversations, meaningful conversations, which you are now more taking towards learning. So would you tell us something about your platform and what it is trying to achieve?
Kapil, sometime in 2020, some of us got together, and we were wondering, the whole genesis of Mensa as we have is happened when we started realizing that a lot of edtech at that point of time was not really delivering the kind of impact that it had to. So there are a lot of edtech platforms. The pandemic was getting a lot of people to go back and learn, but somewhere you would see that people joined XYZ courses, and the rate of engagement, rate of learning, amount that you took away in terms of real tangible learnings was very abysmal, right? If you look at 100 people taking a course, it was very less. And somewhere one of the thoughts that we had is, why can't learning be a lot more fun? Why can't learning be a lot more informal? And one of the first things that Anurag Vaish, who's our chief co-founder, uh, gave this analogy that why can't learning be like how it is, like why does it have to be a classroom? And why can't learning be something like the corridor or the bench in the school where you had the best conversations? So one of the best ways I describe Mensa is that we said, can we have a live audio platform where you could have informal learning conversations, fun conversations about any topic under the sun, which you're curious about, which you want to learn about, with people, where you can have interesting conversations with people who are also trying to learn the same thing, right? You kind of meet them in the corridor of a classroom, and then you have a conversation for a limited time, and then you move on. And that's how the concept of 20 minutes happened. And we said that the best attention span that all of us have, if you look at the TED, all the TED talks are about 18 to 20 minutes. We said the best conversational attention time that all of us have to learn something is reasonably at about 20 minutes. And that's why the 20 minutes came. So that's how Mensa evolved as a live audio platform where you could come and have a good, nice, interesting conversation with people who share the same kind of curiosities. That's how it started. Eventually, we also realized that one of the biggest strengths of the platform is that there is no other platform in the world where you can actually come and speak without any permission. Mensa is the only platform in the world where you could come without any permission and start speaking on the speakers panel. So whether it is, let's say, even if tomorrow Elon Musk is actually speaking, there's no one to stop you on Mensa to come and actually have a conversation with him, provided the speaker panel is empty and you can actually join in, right? So, and we discovered that people were coming and speaking on Mensa, they were taking back a lot of confidence, because when you listen to something, Nidhi, as you would know, or when you actually read something, you gain a lot of knowledge. But the real confidence is when I read a book, when I read an article, if I'm able to share it with you, that's when I really feel empowered. That's when I really feel great, because I've shared it. And all of us understand that talking about something or teaching it is almost like 10x of what you learned. And that's what we started discovering. And that's when communities started organically forming. One of the first ones was about people were coming and saying that, look, when I'm speaking on Mensa, I'm getting better in English. And that's one huge thing, right? In India, a lot of communication confidence was about how can I speak much better in English. That's one learning group that evolved. Then we also had people who are having very high aspiration, but very low on confidence. And we discussed about this, Nidhi, there where they don't have access to great trainings. They don't have access to great coaches. They come from T1, T2, T3 towns. But for them, the biggest thing was that can we have an access to someone like Nidhi, and I can have a conversation with her. Can I understand marketing from Nidhi? Can I ask her questions that makes how can I become good at marketing? How can I do better digital marketing? Can I talk to someone else who is there for them? Whether we like it or not, people like us who have who have had the privilege to be in places where we can offer our experience, that itself is a huge thing. So that is where the entire professional growth came up about career, how to build career confidence, navigating leadership, and all of that. And the third one is personal growth, where you do all of it. How do you grow internally as a person? So books, reading, book reviews, book summaries, spiritual growth, mental health and well-being, and of course critical thinking. So we've got conversations of 20, 20, 25 minutes across all these spaces, right? On Mensa, it's like you. So it's now evolved into a place where you can come, listen, and conversations. Speak on this, build your confidence on an area of your interest or expertise, learn from some of the best people out there, and go back and do that, right? And of course, there are a lot of other features which have come in where we have a lot of curated training programs and a whole lot of that stuff which we discuss about. But largely, this is what it is. Uh, what I earlier said, that I think business storytelling or the whole aspect of communication has moved from just the knowing part to the doing part. And we know that unless you start doing, and every great cricketer or a player or athlete, everyone will say, unless you really go and play the match, you'll never get perfect. So Mensa is that real simulated playground where it is getting you to become better because you're able to talk and share your thoughts with people who matter.
That's really interesting. And I think that there's a lot of scope for it because one is that when you're an audio platform, you're not inhibited, you're able to speak freely. And the more you speak, the better you get.
True.
So talking about Mensa, the platform and audio as a form of communication and learning, we have podcasts are pretty much in. A lot of people are doing podcasts. How is this different from that? How? Because one thing that we have also heard that the passive listening kind of is so some people prefer passive listening when they're doing their work, when they're going for a jogging, when they're in the gym, they're listening to a podcast. But here you are asking people to get involved in an audio medium. How does that work? Does it really trigger any kind of engagement, or is it, do people participate in the conversations?
Podcasts have a reason why they exist, and I think there's a great medium for learning, great medium for engaging yourself while you're doing multiple things. Because uh, today, if you look at the podcasts across, there is such a wide variety of podcasts. There is so much of depth. There is so much of knowledge, right? And some podcasts are so engaging that you are really almost feeling a part of conversation. What is different from Mensa is that you are part of a conversation, right? So so podcasts have their own merit in terms of what they're learning, but it's still a listening platform. Mensa is the only place where you can talk. And the reason why we say is good, it's going to be different, is because I it's very, very difficult to actually think that you will only gain confidence by just listening and seeing YouTube videos or listening to Spotify podcasts or Apple podcasts, right? You can listen to all of it, you can know all of it. But the reality is that what do you do with all of that knowledge? You got to put it in practice. You have to share it with someone. You got to pass it down, or you have to create your own podcast, or you have to write a book, or you have to go share it with someone, use it in a workshop, use it at work. Now, the medium for all of it is communication. So one of my favorite things that I keep telling people, and this is a strong personal belief, is that I feel that you can grow as a person or a leader even if you're not a very good people manager, even if you're not a great decision maker, even if you're a imperfect, how do I say, you're not, even if you're not a great team player, you can still manage to grow. But if there's one thing that you may never grow in your career or as a leader, is if you're poor in your communication. So communication is the centerpiece of all of it, because even if you're a great strategic thinker, you've got to learn what it takes to communicate that across to someone else so that it gets done. Even if you're a person who's very good at execution, the centerpiece of all of it is that you have to be able to communicate the execution. That is the magic where Mensa brings in, right? So you can listen to everything in the world, come and talk on Mensa and talk about it. And that is where you're starting to give. So for the listeners, it's about listening to people, sharing their perspectives, asking questions, and practicing themselves. For people who are actually on the other side, who are the podcasters and everyone else, it is a great place to come and give whatever their knowledge is, right? And you could actually do it in a in a podcasting medium, or you could even do it on Mensa, where you actually have interaction and conversation. The number of people who really come up and speak on Mensa is incredibly high, right? In fact, the statistic that I have is that uh, for every one person, so for every 10 people who actually have spoken at least once on the platform, uh, almost 9 of them continue to be on the platform. So it's a very, very high sticky thing when because uh, I have my say. The biggest thing is about not what everyone else has said. I had my say. It is my perspective. It is a perspective that I shared. I think that's a very, very empowering thing. You can do it on Twitter, you can write on Twitter, you can also do it on LinkedIn. But writing is still one step ahead, isn't it? It doesn't come so easily as talking.
Talk about LinkedIn, the instance where we got connected was your 1 minute story. Tell us something
Ah,
about the 1 minute story, and I think our viewers would like to know about them.
it was in the pandemic 2020 again. I was sitting wondering what to do one of those afternoons like this. And those days, it was a big thing, was almost everyone was starting to write on LinkedIn, right? Everyone's really make the big LinkedIn profiles with all that stuff they were posting. And I was thinking, even I should do something. What do I do? And then I also happened to watch this Big Bang Theory, and one of my favorite series. And there was this episode of Star Wars Day, and all of them celebrate the May the 4th, and it happened to be May the 4th. I was very curious about what is it this about May the 4th, and why is it a Star Wars Day? And I went on and did a lot of studies on, and I got to understand the story of George Lucas, how Star Wars and how this entire fan base and how it all became the Star Wars Day, and May the 4th be with you became one of the big lines. And then I got it all together, and I said, let me write at least this seems to be a very interesting thing. And those days LinkedIn had a character limit. It was almost like 225 words. So I had to kind of fit all of this into a story of 225 words of how George Lucas, born in a very small city in America, and then he goes on and you actually comes across to the biggest directors in University of Southern California, and then goes on to write the Star Wars, and it becomes an epic. And how Star Wars Day becomes May the 4th be with you. And it got the highest number of likes. And I also realized that at that time people were tagging their posts. And I said, okay, what can I tag it? And I realized that this is all finishing on 1 minute. So that's where I put hashtag 1 minute stories. So that was a LinkedIn tag. Eventually, I liked it. I said, oh, I think I seem to have figured out, why can't I write a story every week? And that's how I started reading up a lot of stuff and started getting curious, ask questions. So began a series of about 100 to 150 odd stories, which became a newsletter on Substack, got a lot of subscribers. And then when I decided to make my own consulting company where I work with storytelling, I called it 1 minute stories. The whole idea is that uh, business storytelling is about 1 minute storytelling is a 1 minute stories is a metaphor that can you crunch your experiences in conversations so that you can get in and get out of it within a minute or so. That's when you have the best experience for the listener as well as you. That's the whole idea. I do a lot of work on that space. Conversational storytelling is what I call it.
When you talk about skilling and becoming a storyteller, marketing is a domain of storytelling right now. People, as marketers, it's important that we engage our customers, and one way of doing it is to tell the stories or build a structured narrative. That's how I see storytelling as a skill. In your experience, you have been dealing with marketers who are storytellers, who aspire to be storytellers. What's been your experience like?
One of my first, and this may not go down well with a lot of marketeers, is that generally a lot of marketeers assume that they are at the front end of storytelling and they're leading it. Unfortunately, so it's not because they're not the natural storytellers, but I think they just, like any other skill, they've just taken it for granted. And because they can go and talk about a couple of ads and what happens in that ads, or they've written a good copy, does not necessarily make us very good storytellers. Like you rightly said, I think the whole idea of storytelling is about structuring your thoughts and your narrative in a way which gains attention, engagement, and is able to influence the customer. And you're using a story to make a very strong point. Storytelling is not about entertaining, and more so marketing storytelling. The point is not just entertaining. If entertaining is a byproduct of it, it's a fantastic thing, right? But I think at the end of the day, thinking stories from a marketeer's perspective has got to be, why am I doing it? What is my target audience? What is the thing that is really important for them? And am I giving it to them in a way in which they really understand, not just understand, but will they be able to take action? So I think that's a very, very important skill. And my only pet peeve with a lot of marketing is that they get the theory before the story. So for me, the only advice that I give to all marketers is that get the story before the theory.
That's a very nuanced thing to say, theory and story. Like, some people confuse the two, but I think it's important to have that distinction. Thank you for your perspective, Uday. I really do love your 1 minute stories. They are quick, snackable content, as they're called these days, but very enriching and full of flavors. So,
Thank you.
stories that you share. And with that, we come to the end of this story talkies, and we have some interesting announcement to make. Very shortly, you will see Mensa and We-Storytellers uh, collaborating and bringing in some interesting courses for you. It will be on the platform. We will be calling it We-Storytellers Academy, and we'll be looking forward to have you on the platform. We will have some courses, of course, and we will also invite you to share what you think we should be talking about. With that, we close this edition of Story Talkies. Keep logged in. We'll be back for more.
Thank you so much. I'm so looking forward to this partnership with these storytellers, especially on marketing and storytelling. Thank you so much, Nidhi, for having me on this.